Commander Alara Rhodes had always known that humans were viewed as the new kids on the Galactic block. 70 years of Confederation membership was practically infancy compared to species that had been spacefaring for millennia. But she hadn't expected quite this level of condescension. "Commander, perhaps you could take notes," General Octavian said, his 8 crystalline appendages shimmering with the subtle bioluminescence that indicated mild amusement among the Zeraxians. "Your species has such a quaint talent for documentation." Around the vast circular command table of the GCS Vanguard, representatives of 27 species exchanged glances that transcended biology, the universal look of beings humoring someone they considered primitive. Alara kept her face neutral as she pulled out her small leather-bound notebook and an actual ink pen. The other officers had their quantum-linked neural interfaces and holodisplays, but Alara had always preferred the reliability of paper. Now, of course, it was being treated as further evidence of human backwardness. "As I was saying," continued Admiral Xek of the Mechanoid Collective, his voice box producing perfectly modulated tones through his metallic exoskeleton, "the Vrexian assault on Outpost Epsilon 9 was unlike anything we've encountered. Their new neural disruption field technology effectively neutralized 97% of our defensive systems. Shields, targeting arrays, communication networks, all rendered inoperative." Alara wrote diligently, ignoring the occasional condescending glance from General Octavian. She had been assigned to the Vanguard 6 months ago as part of the Human Integration Initiative, but so far had been given little more than observer status. The irony wasn't lost on her that the ship itself was a monument to compromise, a hodgepodge of architectural and engineering designs from over 24 species that somehow managed to function despite itself. "What about analog systems?" Alara asked, looking up from her notebook. The room fell silent. 27 species turned to look at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright pity. "Analog." General Octavian repeated the word as if it tasted unpleasant. "Commander Rhodes, the Confederation hasn't relied on primitive analog technology for over 3 centuries. Even your own species abandoned such outdated methods decades ago when you joined the galactic community." "With respect, General," Alara persisted, "if the neural disruption field targets quantum entanglement processors and AI-navigated systems, wouldn't non-networked, physically operated mechanisms be immune?" Admiral Xek's sensory apertures widened in what Alara had come to recognize as the mechanoid equivalent of an eye roll. "Commander, perhaps you don't understand. Vrexian technology isn't simply jamming signals. It's creating a cascading failure across all advanced technological interfaces. There's no backup option here." "Of course," Alara replied quietly, returning to her notebook. As the meeting continued, updates from the front lines grew increasingly grim. 3 more outposts had fallen, and the Vrexian Empire was advancing steadily toward Confederation core systems. The assembled leadership spent hours debating increasingly complex technological countermeasures, each requiring more advanced quantum computations than the last. Alara listened, sketched, and occasionally asked questions that were met with patronizing explanations. By the meeting's end, the best plan involved redirecting 70% of the Confederation fleet to create a cascading quantum shield that might interrupt the Vrexian disruption field. As the commanders filed out, General Octavian paused beside Alara's seat. "Commander Rhodes," he said, his voice lower now that they were nearly alone, "I understand humans still value, what do you call it? Gut feelings. Do these primitive instincts of yours suggest any hope for our countermeasure strategy?" Alara closed her notebook carefully before responding. "With respect, General, I believe we're overlooking simpler solutions. The Vrexians have found a way to turn our technological sophistication against us. Perhaps the answer isn't to become even more sophisticated. Are you suggesting we fight an interstellar war with sticks and stones, Commander?" Octavian's bioluminescence flashed in patterns of amusement and disdain. "Not exactly, sir, but I am suggesting we consider alternatives that don't rely entirely on quantum computation and AI-driven systems. General Octavian's crystalline body stiffened slightly. "Commander, the Confederation united 27 species through our shared embrace of advanced technology. We've moved beyond the primitive methods you seem so fond of. When the Vrexians breach our quantum shield and come for us directly, where's your backup plan? Where's your backup?" Alara held up her notebook. "You're looking at it." "Sir." The general's bioluminescence flickered in what Alara recognized as the Zorasian equivalent of scoff before he turned and glided from the room. Alone in the vast conference chamber, Alara flipped through her notes and sketches. While the others had been proposing increasingly complex solutions, she had been drawing diagrams of much older technology. Radio transmitters, ballistic projectile weapons, mechanical targeting systems, and hardwire communication networks. Technology too simple to be affected by the neural disruption field. As she closed her notebook, the ship's warning system activated. "Attention all personnel. Multiple Vrexian vessels detected in Sector 5. Estimated time to intercept, 6 hours. All command staff report to battle stations." This is not a drill. Alara tucked her notebook into her uniform pocket and headed for the bridge. She suspected they would need her primitive ideas sooner than General Octavian thought. The corridors of the GCS Vanguard were a testament to interspecies compromise. Sections built for different gravities, atmospheres, and biological needs, all connected by transition chambers and adaptive walkways. Under normal circumstances, it was an elegant, if somewhat bewildering showcase of unity. Now, as crew members from 27 species rushed to battle stations, it felt chaotic and inefficient. Alara made her way to the bridge, dodging a group of Axelarian technicians whose gelatinous bodies quivered with anxiety. The ship's AI was announcing updates in 27 languages simultaneously, creating a cacophony of warnings and instructions. On the bridge, General Octavian hovered at the central command platform, surrounded by holographic displays of the approaching Vrexian fleet. Admiral Ksek stood nearby, his metallic appendages interfacing directly with the ship's tactical systems. "Commander Rhodes," Octavian acknowledged her arrival without looking away from the displays. "I assume you've come to observe our response to the crisis." "I've come to help, General," Alara replied, taking her assigned station near the back of the bridge. Her console was markedly simpler than those used by the other officers, a concession to humanity's supposedly less advanced neural processing. "The quantum shield is nearly at full power," Admiral Ksek announced. "We've redirected energy from non-essential systems and increased computational resources. Theoretical models suggest a 73% chance of neutralizing the Vrexian disruption field." Alara studied the tactical display. The Vrexian ships were approaching in a classic pincer formation, designed to trap the Vanguard between two fire zones. It was a strategy as old as naval warfare on Earth, which suggested to Alara that for all their advanced technology, the Vrexians still understood fundamental tactical principles. "Admiral," she said, "have we considered that the Vrexians might have anticipated our quantum shield? Their disruption technology specifically targets our most advanced systems." Admiral Ksek's sensory apertures narrowed. "The quantum shield is utilizing a completely new configuration. There's no way they could have predicted. They predicted our standard defenses at Epsilon 9, Alara interrupted, and at the 3 outposts that fell after. Each time, we responded with more advanced technology, and each time, they were ready." General Octavian turned to face her, his crystalline structure catching the light from the tactical displays. "What exactly are you suggesting, Commander?" "I'm suggesting we develop a backup plan that doesn't rely on quantum technology at all." Alara pulled out her notebook and flipped to a diagram she'd sketched during the earlier meeting. "We still have electromagnetic rail gun technology on board, yes? Originally installed for debris clearing." "Yes, but those are maintenance tools, not weapons," Admiral Ksek replied dismissively. "They could be," Alara insisted. "With minimal modifications, they could fire kinetic projectiles. No quantum guidance needed, just basic ballistic calculations." "Ballistic weapons?" General Octavian's bioluminescence flashed in patterns of disbelief. Commander, this isn't some primitive planetary skirmish. This is interstellar warfare. Exactly, Ilara said. And right now, the Vrexians have found a way to neutralize our interstellar technology. So maybe we need to think less interstellar. Before General Octavian could respond, the tactical officer, a Thrillaxian with 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head, called out an alert. Vrexian fleet has increased speed. New intercept time, 2 hours. The bridge erupted in activity as officers adjusted their calculations and systems. Ilara used the moment to access ship schematics from her console, searching for other potential primitive technologies that might still be functional under a neural disruption field. To her surprise, she found several. The ship's original design had included numerous redundant systems, many of which had been replaced or upgraded over time, but never removed. There were hydraulic door mechanisms, analog communication systems, and even a physical navigation backup using stellar cartography and optical sighting instruments. Commander Rhodes, General Octavian's voice broke into her thoughts. Since you seem so concerned about backup systems, perhaps you could review the emergency evacuation protocols for the crew. We need to be prepared for all contingencies. It was a dismissal, thinly veiled as an assignment. Ilara recognized the political move. Keep the human busy with something inconsequential while the real officers handle the crisis. Yes, General, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. She transferred the evacuation protocols to her personal device and continued her clandestine survey of the ship's older systems. If her suspicions were correct, they'd need every piece of pre-quantum technology they could salvage. 2 hours passed with increasing tension. The Vanguard's quantum shield was fully deployed, creating a shimmering barrier of energy around the massive ship. Fleet communications reported that other Confederation vessels were moving into supporting positions, all implementing similar defensive measures. Vrexian fleet dropping out of FTL, the tactical officer announced. 30 vessels detected. Lead vessel is significantly larger than any previously encountered Vrexian ship. The main view screen shifted to show the approaching fleet. At its center was a massive vessel shaped like a serrated blade, its surface rippling with dark energy patterns. That's their flagship, Admiral X-SciFi stated unnecessarily. Sensor analysis suggests it's the source of the most powerful disruption field we've yet encountered. General Octavian's crystalline form seemed to sharpen as he focused on the tactical situation. All systems at maximum readiness. Prepare to engage the moment they come within range. Ilara watched as the distance between the fleets steadily decreased. Something about the Vrexian formation bothered her, but she couldn't quite place what it was. They seemed to be holding back, allowing the Vanguard to prepare its defenses. They're letting us set up the quantum shield, she realized suddenly. They want us to commit our resources to it. She tried to voice her concern, but at that moment, the Vrexian flagship emitted a pulse of dark energy that rapidly expanded toward the Confederation fleet. Disruption field detected, called out the sensor officer. Impact in 10 seconds. Quantum shield at full power, Admiral X-SciFi reported confidently. Disruption should be contained. Ilara wasn't convinced. She quickly secured her tablet and notebook in her pockets and braced herself against her console. The disruption wave hit the quantum shield with a visual effect like oil spreading across water. For a moment, the shield held, its energy patterns distorting but maintaining integrity. Then, with sudden simultaneity, every quantum-based system on the bridge flickered and died. The main lighting failed, plunging the bridge into darkness before emergency chemical lights automatically activated, bathing everything in a dim red glow. The holographic displays disappeared, the neural interfaces went dead, and even the artificial gravity fluctuated momentarily. Status report, General Octavian demanded, his bioluminescence now the brightest light on the bridge. Nobody answered immediately. The officers were frantically trying to reactivate their consoles and interfaces, but nothing was responding. Total quantum systems failure, General. Admiral X-SciFi finally reported, his voice box producing a flatness that suggested he had switched to backup power. The disruption field penetrated our shields as if they weren't there. That's impossible, Octavian insisted. Our shield was specifically designed to counter their technology. And they clearly anticipated that, Elara said, rising from her station. While the others were still reeling from the system's failure, she had pulled out her notebook and was flipping through pages of contingency plans. General Octavian turned to her, his crystalline form rigid with what might have been anger or fear. Do you have something constructive to offer, Commander? Or just observation? Actually, sir, I do. Elara approached the central command platform. We need to switch to analog systems immediately. The Vrexians have clearly developed a way to target quantum technology specifically, but they may not be prepared for more traditional responses. What analog systems? Admiral X-SciFi demanded. Everything on this ship operates through quantum networks. Not everything, Elara replied. She tapped commands into her tablet, which was still functioning due to its relatively primitive processor. There are backup systems throughout the ship, originally installed as failsafes. During construction, most haven't been used in decades, but they should still function. The bridge officers exchanged skeptical glances, but as the seconds ticked by with no recovery of their primary systems, desperation began to replace doubt. Explain quickly, Commander, General Octavian ordered, his tone notably lacking its usual condescension. Elara displayed a schematic on her tablet. The ship has hydraulic control systems that can manually operate essential functions like life support and basic maneuvering. There's a radio communication network that uses simple electromagnetic waves rather than quantum entanglement. And those maintenance railguns I mentioned, they can be modified to fire kinetic projectiles using electrical current rather than quantum guidance. And you expect us to operate all this antiquated equipment manually? Admiral X-SciFi asked incredulously. Do you have a better suggestion, Admiral? Elara countered. Because right now, the Vrexians are closing in, and we're essentially defenseless. As if to emphasize her point, the ship shuddered as something struck its now unshielded hull. General Octavian's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, a sign of internal conflict among Xeraxians. Finally, he said, Proceed, Commander Rhodes. But understand that you are now responsible for this ship's survival. Elara nodded grimly. First, we need to establish communication with the rest of the fleet. If the Vrexians can take down our systems this easily, the other ships are likely in the same situation. She led a small team to an access panel near the back of the bridge, revealing an old-style radio transmitter that had been installed during the ship's original construction and then forgotten. While Elara worked to activate the device, she delegated other tasks to the bridge officers. Admiral X-SciFi, your species has experience with mechanical interfaces. Can you access the hydraulic controls for the maneuvering thrusters? We need to change our position to avoid being a stationary target. The mechanoid nodded reluctantly and moved toward another access panel. General Octavian, we need your people's computational abilities. The rail guns require ballistic calculations, simple physics, but we need precision. For once, the general didn't argue or condescend. With their advanced technology neutralized, even the most sophisticated species on board were beginning to recognize the value of Elara's primitive knowledge. As they worked, the ship continued to shudder under occasional impacts. Without their quantum sensors, they had no way of knowing exactly what was hitting them or how much damage was being done. Elara could only hope that the Vanguard's physical armor was holding. After several tense minutes, the radio crackled to life. Elara adjusted the frequency, searching for any Confederation signals. This is Commander Rhodes of the GCS Vanguard, she transmitted. All ships, switch to emergency radio frequency and respond. Static filled the air, then gradually responses began to come in. As Elara had suspected, the entire Confederation fleet was experiencing the same system's failure. Some ships had already begun implementing backup measures similar to what she was proposing, but many were still paralyzed, their crews too dependent on quantum technology to function without it. Coordinate with any ships that have functioning communication, Elara instructed the communications officer. We need to establish a formation using visual signals if necessary. Meanwhile, Admiral Xek had managed to activate the hydraulic maneuvering system, giving them limited control over the ship's movement. It was crude compared to their usual precision capabilities, but it was enough to begin a evasive pattern. Commander called a sensor technician who had rigged a primitive electromagnetic detector. I'm picking up energy buildups from the Vrexian fleet. I think they're preparing to fire their main weapons. Ilara nodded grimly. They know we're vulnerable. General, what's the status of the railguns? We've managed to connect 7 of them to independent power sources, Octavian replied, his crystalline form now dulled with stress. The ballistic calculations are inelegant, but should be sufficient for close-range targeting. Load them with whatever dense materials we can find, Ilara ordered. Hull repair components, spare parts, anything that can cause physical damage on impact. As the crew scrambled to implement her orders, the main view screen, now operating on a basic video feed rather than its usual holographic display, showed the Vrexian flagship moving into firing position. They're hailing us, reported the communications officer suddenly. Audio only. Ilara glanced at General Octavian, who nodded his authorization. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with a harsh, grating voice. Confederation vessel. Your technological superiority has failed you. Your quantum delusions have been exposed. Surrender now, and your crew will be permitted to live as subjects of the Vrexian Empire. General Octavian moved to respond, but Ilara raised a hand to stop him. Let me handle this, she said quietly. We need to buy time. The general hesitated, then nodded. This is Commander Ilara Rhodes of the GCS Vanguard, she transmitted. We acknowledge your impressive technological achievement. Before we discuss terms, we request information on the status of our outposts that have already fallen to your forces. It was a stalling tactic, and from the contemptuous laugh that came through the speakers, the Vrexian commander knew it. Your concern for your doomed comrades is noted, human. I am Supreme Commander Vrex of the Imperium flagship Devastator. You have 5 minutes to initiate surrender protocols before we destroy your vessel. The transmission cut off. Human, General Octavian noted. They addressed you specifically. They detected that I was different, Ilara said, which means they're scanning us somehow, despite our systems being down. What do we do now, Commander? Admiral Xek asked, and Ilara was struck by the fact that the question contained no trace of sarcasm or condescension. We fight back with what they don't expect. Ilara turned to the tactical station. Are the railguns ready? Yes, Commander. 7 guns, manually operated, with targeting based on optical sighting. On my mark, fire all of them at the flagship. Aim for what appeared to be sensor arrays or weapons emplacements. Ilara turned to General Octavian. General, I need your people's light-based communication abilities. Can you signal the other Confederation ships with instructions? The Zorasian nodded, his crystalline form beginning to pulse with complex patterns of light. What instructions? Tell them to use any kinetic weapons they can activate. Ballistic, projectile, even physical ramming if necessary. The Vrexians expect us to be helpless without our quantum technology. Let's show them how wrong they are. As General Octavian began transmitting instructions using his species bioluminescence, Ilara coordinated the railgun teams. It was crude warfare by Confederation standards, closer to 20th century naval battles than modern space combat, but it was all they had. Vrexian flagship is charging weapons, reported the sensor officer. Energy signature increasing. All railguns fire on my mark, Ilara commanded. She waited until the Devastator's energy readings peaked, suggesting their weapons were about to discharge. Fire. 7 electromagnetic railguns, hastily converted from maintenance tools to weapons of war, simultaneously launched dense metal projectiles at tremendous speed toward the Vrexian flagship. There was no quantum guidance, no advanced targeting algorithms, just basic physics and the optical sighting skills of the gunners. 6 of the 7 projectiles hit the Vrexian ship. On the view screen, they could see small explosions erupt across its hull where the impacts occurred. Most significantly, The energy buildup that had been detected suddenly fluctuated and dispersed. "Direct hits!" exclaimed the tactical officer. They've halted their weapons charge." Across the fleet, other Confederation ships began to follow the Vanguard's example. Vessels that had managed to activate similar backup systems launched their own improvised attacks. Everything from repurposed mining charges to literal debris fired from emergency disposal systems. The Vrexian fleet, clearly unprepared for this primitive form of warfare, began to adjust their formation. Their disruption field was still active, preventing the Confederation from using any quantum technology, but provided no defense against simple kinetic projectiles. "They're moving to a defensive posture," Admiral Ksek observed, studying the enemy fleet's movements. "They didn't expect physical resistance, because they thought we were entirely dependent on advanced technology," Ilera said. "Just like we were. They found our weakness, but they didn't account for our ability to adapt." General Octavian's bioluminescence had taken on a pattern Ilera had never seen before, something between respect and amazement. "Commander Rhodes, I believe we may owe you an apology." "Later, General," Ilera replied with a small smile. "Right now, let's keep firing those railguns." For the next 20 minutes, an unprecedented form of space battle unfolded. The Confederation fleet, reduced to using technology that would have been considered outdated centuries ago, gradually gained the upper hand against the Vrexian forces. Without quantum shields to protect them, the Vrexian ships proved surprisingly vulnerable to kinetic impacts. The Devastator, however, remained largely intact despite multiple hits. Its hull was clearly designed to withstand physical damage in a way the smaller vessels were not. "There. Transmitting again," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," Ilera ordered. The voice of Supreme Commander Vrex filled the bridge once more, but now it contained a note of uncertainty beneath its arrogance. "Your primitive response is unexpected, Confederation. Perhaps we have underestimated your resourcefulness." "Perhaps you have," Ilera replied calmly. "Your disruption field targets our quantum technology, but there are older ways of fighting that still work quite effectively." "So I see." There was a pause. "A temporary withdrawal seems prudent. This encounter has been informative." "Before you go," Ilera said quickly, "you should know that we're already adapting to your disruption technology. Next time we meet, we'll be prepared on all technological levels." It was a bluff, of course. They had no idea yet how to counter the Vrexian weapon. But sowing doubt in the enemy's mind could be as valuable as any physical weapon. After another pause, Vrex responded, "As will we, Commander Rhodes. This is merely the opening move in a longer game." The transmission ended, and on the view screen, they watched as the Vrexian fleet began to withdraw, moving slowly at first, then accelerating into FTL. The bridge of the Vanguard erupted in cheers and expressions of relief that transcended species. Ilera found herself surrounded by officers offering thanks and congratulations in a variety of biological and mechanical ways. General Octavian approached her last, his crystalline form now glowing with a steady, respectful light. "Commander Rhodes," he said, his voice lacking any trace of its former condescension, "it appears the Confederation has much to learn from humanity after all." Ilera smiled tiredly. "From our past, General, sometimes looking backward is the best way to move forward." Admiral Ksek joined them, his metallic form showing signs of strain from the unconventional interface with the hydraulic systems. "The fleet is reporting minimal casualties, thanks to your quick thinking, Commander. However, the damage to our quantum systems appears extensive. We should begin working on a dual technology approach immediately," Ilera suggested. "Maintain our quantum systems for their efficiency and capabilities, but incorporate analog backups that can function independently if needed." General Octavian nodded thoughtfully. A civilization that relies entirely on one form of technology, no matter how advanced, is vulnerable to anyone who finds a way to neutralize it. "Exactly," Ilera said. "Diversity isn't just important for biology, it's essential for technology too." As emergency lights flickered back to full brightness, indicating the gradual recovery of some systems. Alara pulled out her notebook one more time. On a fresh page, she began sketching ideas for a new class of Confederation vessels, ships that would combine the most advanced quantum technology with reliable analog systems, creating a hybrid approach that would be far more difficult to neutralize. "What are you working on now, Commander?" Admiral Ksek asked, peering at her notebook with newfound respect. "The future, Admiral," Alara replied. "Or perhaps I should say, a future that remembers its past." Over the next several weeks, the Confederation fleet underwent a transformation. Under Alara's guidance, ships were retrofitted with dual technology systems, quantum computers working alongside analog backups, neural interfaces supplemented by manual controls, AI-driven weapons complemented by physically operated alternatives. The Vanguard became the flagship of this new approach, a testament to the strengths of both cutting-edge advancement and time-tested reliability. Alara found herself elevated from observer to key advisor, her primitive knowledge now recognized as valuable wisdom. 3 months after their encounter with the Vrexian fleet, Alara stood on the newly redesigned bridge of the Vanguard, watching as General Octavian demonstrated the ship's new capabilities to a delegation of Confederation leaders. "As you can see," the general explained, his crystalline form glowing with pride, "we can now transition seamlessly between quantum and analog operations. If one system is compromised, the other takes over automatically." One of the delegates, a Thrillaxian elder, fixed all 6 of his eyes on Alara. "Commander Rhodes, I understand this paradigm shift was largely your initiative." "It was a team effort," Alara replied diplomatically. "But yes, I did suggest that we might benefit from integrating older technologies with our more advanced systems." "A remarkable insight," the elder commented. "One that has potentially saved the Confederation from catastrophic defeat." General Octavian's bioluminescence flickered in what Alara now recognized as the Zorsian equivalent of a reminiscent smile. "I once asked Commander Rhodes where her backup plan was, and she replied, 'You're looking at it.' I didn't understand then that she was referring not just to her notebook, but to the human approach of maintaining connections to their technological past. We learned long ago not to put all our eggs in one basket," Alara explained. "It's an old human saying that means. We understand the concept now," Admiral Ksek interrupted gently, "and we're implementing it across the fleet." As the delegation continued their tour, Alara remained on the bridge, looking out at the stars. The Vrexians would return, she had no doubt, and they would likely have adapted their own strategies based on what they had learned. But now the Confederation would be ready, not just with the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but with the wisdom to know its limitations. She pulled out her notebook, now something of a good luck charm among the crew, and jotted down a final thought. "The most sophisticated technology in the universe is useless without the simplest tool of all, human adaptability." Admiral Ksek approached as she closed the notebook. "The delegation is impressed," he said. "There's talk of promoting you to strategic command." Alara smiled. "I'm happy where I am, Admiral. On the front lines, where theory meets practice, where quantum meets analog," he added with the mechanical equivalent of a chuckle. "Where the future meets the past." "Exactly," Alara said, tucking away her notebook. "Because sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you've been." Outside the viewports of the Vanguard, the stars stretched endlessly, filled with both dangers and possibilities. Somewhere out there, the Vrexians were planning their next move. But for now, the Confederation had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes not from abandoning what came before, but from building upon it. As if reading her thoughts, General Octavian joined them at the viewport. "Commander Rhodes," he said quietly, "the Vrexian ambassador has requested a formal meeting to discuss terms. They seem impressed by our resilience, and perhaps a little worried about what other primitive surprises we might have," Alara suggested. Indeed, the general's crystalline form shimmered with something like amusement. "It seems your backup plan may have secured us more than just a tactical victory." "That's the thing about backup plans, General," Alara replied with a smile. "Sometimes they turn out to be the main event." Together, the three officers, human, Zorasian, and mechanoid, looked out at the stars, each seeing something different yet sharing a newfound understanding. That in the vast complexity of the universe, sometimes the simplest solutions were the most powerful. And that wisdom, unlike technology, never became obsolete.